before I multiply and divide rational expressions, meaning fractions that have variables in them, I'm going to go ahead and show the process when you don't have variables involved. So going back to middle school math here. So when you don't have a variable involved, let's start with number 1. All you need to do is just multiply straight across. So 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. And then you can simplify. 8 over 10, both are divisible by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So you end up with 4/5. Now, that's great, but I want to show you another method of approaching the same problem where you actually simplify before you multiply. This will be really helpful when we introduce variables into our multiplication. It makes it a lot easier if you simplify before you multiply straight across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at any numerator that has a common factor with any denominator. So the 8 and 2 have a common factor of 2, so I can divide them both by 2 and then multiply straight across. So 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 5 is 5, and you've got your final answer. So, same idea, and notice it's the same answer. That's kind of important. But let's go to the same idea, but we're going to go ahead and simplify before we multiply just to make life easier. Now, there are times where it is easier just to multiply straight across, and I'll talk about when I think it's a little easier, but let's go ahead and just do that process here. So 2 over 3 divided by 7/9. This is a division problem. When it comes to division problems, the first thing you want to do is change it to a multiplication problem. And the way you do that is you keep the first fraction the same, and then you multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. Some people use the saying keep, change, flip, or copy dot flip to remember that process. Now I'm going to go ahead and simplify before we multiply by finding a numerator that has a common factor with any of the denominators. So 9 and 3 have a common factor of 3. So I'm going to divide them both by 3, and then I can multiply straight across. So 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 7 is 7. So your answer is 6/7 for this problem. Now, I'm going to start out with some problems that don't require as much simplifying. So this problem right here, you're going to notice has all multiplication. While there are other problems that have like addition, subtraction, and so on. Okay. So the way you simplify is going to be slightly different on those types of problems, but I want to start out with ones that have no addition or subtraction. We're just multiplying everything. So on these types of problems, you can certainly go ahead and just simplify. Sometimes that gets a little messy just because there's so many pieces involved. There's like x's, there's y's, there's coefficients, and so on. So on these problems where there's no addition, subtraction, sometimes I do find it easier, or students find it easier, to just multiply and then simplify. So for this problem, if I just multiply straight across, there's an x to the first times x squared. So this would end up being 5x to the third, y to the third. And then the denominator, 2 times 10 is 20. And then we have x to the fifth. And then y times y is y squared, because we add those exponents. This just makes it a little easier because there's not quite as many like moving parts, I guess, to then simplify. So I just break it up where I simplify the coefficients. So 5/20 is the same thing. I'll write it right beneath. Oops. 5/20 both are divisible by 5. So that's 1/4. And then we've got our x's. So it's x to the third over x to the fifth. So both of them have, so remember x to the third is like x times x times x. X to the fifth is 5 x's multiplied together. So we're removing 3 x's out from each. So the denominator would still have 2 x's, or x squared. Same idea for the numerator, or the y's. There will be a y to the first power in the numerator. And so your final answer is just 1y/4x squared, or the way I like to write that is just y over 4x squared. And let's go ahead and do one more of these types of problems. So once again, there's no addition or subtraction. There's just a lot of variables, a lot of numbers involved. So sometimes it just makes life easier if you simplify or you just multiply right away. Now this is a division problem. So remember, for division, before we can multiply, we've got to do our keep, change, flip. So I'll keep the first one the same. And then I'm change it to a multiplication and then flip the second one. So 15y over x to the third. Now you can certainly start simplifying things now, or you can choose to go ahead and multiply straight across. So 4 times 15 is 60. And then we've got x to the third. And then y to the fifth times y is y to the sixth. And then the denominator, we've got a 9. And then x to the first times x to the third is x to the fourth. And then we've got a y to the seventh. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and simplify this part. I would simplify the coefficients first. So 60 over y, those are both, 60 over 9. Both of these are divisible by a 3. So that's an awkward place to write that. So we're just going to, rather than writing it down, I am just going to divide them. So 60 divided by 3 is 20. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. Then I look at the x's and I simplify those. So there are more x's being multiplied together in the denominator by 1. So there's going to be an x to the first on the denominator. And then same thing with the y's. There's one more y than we have on the top. So it's just y to the first on the denominator. And I just want to write it so it looks a little bit more centered. But that's our answer, is 20 over 3xy.